This is episode number 2 of the Lifestylepreneur podcast. This interview is with Mark Schaefer, and we're going to talk about how to create a business from a blog and use Twitter to really drive a ton of traffic back to your website. Welcome to the Lifestylepreneur podcast. I'm your host, Kris Gilbertson, and I'm an author, speaker, and an expert on how to help you launch your own successful podcast. And the reason I designed this show is to help you create a business that allows you to live the lifestyle of your dreams. Tune in every Friday as I'll be interviewing top experts and lifestylepreneurs from all over the world who will share with you actionable training and advice to give you the insider track on taking your business to the next level. I'm going to work really hard for you to pull out the most incredible nuggets of training from all of these experts. And the best part, it's all free just for you. And be sure to join us at www.lifestyleacademy.com and subscribe to receive your free 3-part mini podcast course to help you launch your own podcast and on your way to generating free leads, traffic, and sales on autopilot and creating the platform for your lifestyle business. Plus, I'll also be sending you the cliff notes from the best of the best trainings on the podcast, delivered right to your inbox to make it easy for you to implement these strategies and move forward in your business. Now, let's get started. Well, my next guest is Mark Schaefer, a globally recognized blogger, speaker, educator, and business consultant, along with being a best-selling author and global business strategist. And in fact, his blog, Grow, is one of the top marketing blogs in the world. And he's also the founder of Social Slam, a national social media event taking place every April, and he's the author of 3 best-selling books, Return on Influence, Born to Blog, and The Tao of Twitter. And so I'm so excited to start picking Mark's brain on how he's really dominated the blog sphere and grown a huge business from his blog. So we're going to jump right into Mark telling his story of how he got started blogging for his career.
Started out on my own about 6 years ago, and that was the time when social media was really starting to pick up and gain momentum. And I realized that to be a successful consultant, and also I began teaching at that time at the university level, that I needed to immerse myself in this. I couldn't talk to people about social media unless I was doing it myself. So I experimented a little bit, and to be honest with you, I was not a natural. I mean, I grew up in a big corporate B2B kind of environment, a traditional sort of marketing environment. And when I first tried Twitter, for example, I just thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen. And it took me literally 3 to 4 months to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is because Twitter is not intuitive.
Right.
Facebook is, fairly intuitive. Certainly YouTube is pretty easy to get around, but Twitter is like entering a foreign country to many people. Mm-hmm. And the first tweet I ever received was, "It's 4 a.m., confirming this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen." So I had the idea for the book because I wanted to help other people get it too, and I started a blog. And again, the same thing is, I didn't know what I was doing. I was stumbling around and fumbling around and didn't even do a lot of research or reading. It was just kind of an experiment. And I think what made my blog take off is because I am somewhat unusual in the blogosphere, in the social media marketing blogosphere anyway, in that, I've got 30 years of experience. I've worked in all kinds of different environments, and corporate and international environments. I've run marketing departments and built global teams. So I have a different perspective, and I can help connect the dots between real corporate needs and objectives to some of this new social media and content marketing type of opportunities that we have.
Right. Well, I love that. I love how you're like when you got started, because Twitter, you helped demystify that for me, because I was still like, what? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. I know there's a lot of business owners like that, but I want to talk about blogging for a little bit first, because that was interesting to hear that wasn't something that necessarily came right away. I mean, with your expertise, that's when you realized that you could explode that and share your knowledge with people. So what do you suggest for business owners that are just getting started with blogging and maybe not sure how to use that in their business?
Well, first, let me take a step back and mention that to succeed in social media, obviously you need content, and I think most businesses are starting to understand that. Maybe they're on Facebook, perhaps they're on Twitter, but I think the better question to ask is, what is the source of your rich content? You're not going to have the opportunity for to have your message spread virally, to have the opportunity for massive exposure and massive reach, unless you provide something a little deeper than a Facebook update or a tweet. And generally speaking, that has to be one of three things. It has to be a blog, a podcast, or a video series. And I would also say for some businesses, Pinterest might work. If you've got a visual kind of business, Pinterest is for real. Pinterest is bigger than LinkedIn now, and really is successful at driving a lot of traffic. It is legitimate. But for most businesses, a source of rich content they should focus on would be blogging, video, and or podcasting. And the reason I focus on blogging quite a bit is because for most businesses, that seems to be the most accessible and has a lot of extra benefits. You get a lot of extra search engine optimization benefits, a lot of lead generation benefits, even if you don't have a lot of people reading the thing. So blogging, that's why I think blogging is very important to many businesses, because if you look at how accessible a source of rich content is for them, blogging seems to be the answer. It seems to be the easiest thing to do.
Excellent. Now, with blogging for what you've been able to create in the space, because there are a ton of blogs out there, how have you been able to separate yourself and stand out amongst all the blogs?
I think there's really only one way to do that. To stand out, you have to be interesting and original. And the only way to do that is to have the courage to dig down and be yourself, because there's only one you. And this is a real problem. It's the problem, I think, for a lot of bloggers out there, whether it's an individual blogger or a business, because it's safe and easy to write a blog post like the 5 biggest mistakes on Twitter. But that's been written a million times.
Right.
It's a little edgier, a little more difficult to write a post like my 5 biggest failures on Twitter.
Right.
My 5 biggest victories on blogging. 5 things that make me joyful about my job. 5 things that make me angry about our industry. Now, those are more difficult to write, but those are the posts that are going to get read. Those are the ones that are going to cut, above the noise and become the signal and attract readership. And it takes some courage to do that. It takes some experimentation to do that. It takes a lot of organizational support to do that. But I think the best bloggers are understanding that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I love that. It's that level of, getting deep, the vulnerability factor. And I love when you talk about in your book and the Tao Twitter, you say what people are seeking is human interaction that leads to connections. And that is like the best way to open that door up where people can really connect with you. So that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So you also talk about in your book what is the new media marketing mindset, and I want you to talk about that because there has been a shift with regard to marketing, and I'd love for you to share your insights on all the different companies that you work with.
Well, it is very important to understand this, critically important, because we have this pattern when we are introduced to a new technology. Initially, we treat it like the old technology. So, for example, believe it or not, I remember being in business before we had websites. And before we had websites, we had brochures. So that's how we sold our business. That's how we promoted our products. We had these, brochures. We spent a lot of money on printing. So when we were trying to figure out the whole web thing, the first thing we did is we took these brochures over to this, crazy looking web person and said, make this into our website. You can use the same pictures. You can use the same copy. We're falling behind.
Right? Yeah.
We've got to compete. We need a website. And so literally the first websites were brochures. And so now what are people accustomed to today? Advertising, broadcasting. We've been conditioned to do that for 100 years, and it's worked really, really well. So a lot of businesses approach social media and say, aha, another place to advertise, a new place to put our press releases. But thank you for playing. It requires a new approach. And that approach, I write about in the book. In fact, I mean, the Tao of Twitter, it's a Chinese word that means path. And I chose that because I think there is a path, and it took me a long time to understand it, that it wasn't about the tweets and the retweets and the technology and the widgets and the gadgets. It's how you connect to people, business relationships, business, sales. It's built on people you know and trust. And Twitter and social media, these are the greatest networking tools ever created in history. And yet we forget some of these fundamental things that we've learned when we get into this digital space. So the number one thing to understand is the catalyst that makes things go is content. You need to have content that is relevant, interesting, timely, and maybe even a little entertaining, because people love to share entertaining content. So if you need to think very carefully about your content strategy. Now, most businesses are starting to get that, but the part they miss is the network strategy. This is point number 2, that people need to find a relevant audience. So many businesses, they create a website or a Facebook page or a Twitter account, and they're disappointed because nothing happens. And they're creating content, and they figure, well, build it and they will come. And it doesn't work that way, because, I mean, sometimes it does. If you're a huge brand like Coca-Cola or Nike, and you're beloved and you're spending millions and millions of dollars on advertising. But if you're like me or you or some of your listeners, we probably don't have that kind of budget.
Right.
And so we need to be mindful and systematic about our network. We need to find those people just like we would in real life. We would go to networking meetings, and we would purposefully connect with people who have some disposition to help us or support us, or maybe even buy from us. Then the third piece is authentic helpfulness. People are sick of being advertised to. They're sick of being marketed to. They're not going to spend 30 seconds with one of your ads. People avoid ads. They skip through ads. They flip over ads. But they are going to spend time with you and your content that's helpful and useful. And they want to find individuals and companies that will help them make money, save time, have a happier life, have a healthier life. And if you do that, if that's your goal, to help, to serve, to be useful, to teach, then you're not going to have to uh, advertise to find these people. They're going to find you, because people are out there asking questions. They're out there, trying to find your products and services. So help them out. And that's this concept called inbound marketing, where you create content that is so useful, so helpful, that when people are Googling, they're going to find you and they're going to connect you, and your acquisition costs are much lower.
Right. Oh, I love it. Now, what about when you strategize with companies that their main campaign has been offline, where they're doing direct mail pieces, they're doing radio? What do you suggest for those type of businesses?
Well, first of all, I approach that very humbly, because look, I'm not the expert. These people are experts, and if they know what's working, well, then let's not mess it up.
Right.
But what I try to do is at least introduce the idea that if they're focused on traditional media, there might be a problem. Because I'll give you an example. I was up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a few weeks ago. They've got a daily newspaper up there. They've had a daily newspaper for 100 years. Now, that daily newspaper in January just went to 3 days a week. In the New York Times today, there's an article about how the traditional television networks and their affiliates are dying. They're struggling because they're not getting the advertising revenue. Why? Because people aren't sitting down in front of their TVs. There's no such thing as regularly scheduled programming anymore.
Exactly.
They watch these things on Hulu and on Netflix and on their iPads, they're moving through the commercials. They don't want to see the commercials. And so what I just simply try to get people to think about is, if you're depending on these traditional modes for advertising, don't you think you should at least consider having a useful presence on the social web? For an entire generation of people, this is the preferred way to learn. This is the preferred way to connect and get information. I mean, people under the age of 24 never leave Facebook. Facebook isn't a website. Facebook is a lifestyle. Right. And they're using Facebook as a search engine to find, products and services and companies. So, I mean, I talked to this guy today. He works with this group of auto dealers, and he's so frustrated because some of the auto dealers want to actually they're like cutting their efforts in social media. I'm just thinking, are you kidding me? If you don't have a social strategy, or at least know enough about it to make the right decision for your business, it's like trying to be in business without even knowing TV exists, or without knowing newspapers exist, because this is the way people get their information today.
Yeah, and I always talk about it. It's the shift into consumer-controlled content. So they're taking it with them. But really, what I like about what you're talking about is it's building a new platform where everybody's at. And it's not so much because you talk a lot about this in your book, and I like how you talk about, because people always talk about, well, they want quantitative results from social media because they're used to knowing what their ROI is. But can you talk more about that and how that plays into that whole mindset?
Actually, Kris, I wrote a blog post about it Monday that I think is very relevant to your question. And the point that I made was, first of all, I mean, I'm a measurement person. I mean, I'm a data geek, and everything we do in our businesses and as marketers should be accounted for and should be measured, and we should be driving shareholder value or stakeholder value. Now, having said that, where a lot of businesses are just getting all tied up is they're trying to figure out, what's the ROI of social media? I mean, this is a big hurdle. And what I'm trying to get businesses to think about is that this is about building relationships that lead to engagement and hopefully purchases and loyalty. So it's more like, how do you measure the effectiveness of going to a Chamber of Commerce meeting or going to a trade show or an association meeting? That's where you build up these contacts. That's where you build up these networks. And I think that's a better framework for judging the place of social media. Now, I'm being simple here. I'm simplifying things because there are tons of ways to use social media. You can use it for to get ideas for new products and services. You can use it for research. You can use it for business intelligence. You can use it for education. You can use it for HR and recruiting. You can use it for public relations. There's tons of ways to use it. But strictly speaking, as far as sales and marketing, which is what most people think about, I think you need to think about the qualitative benefits as well as the quantitative benefits. Because here's an example, Kris. Through my social media connections, I was invited to speak at Oxford University. All right? Just a spectacular, wonderful day that opened up a lot of new doors for me. Through my social media connections, I found an intern for my business. Through my social media connections, I found speakers for the Social Slam conference you mentioned at the top of the program. Now, how would you fit those tangible business benefits into a spreadsheet?
Right.
You can't. All right? And yet, those are important, legitimate business benefits. And I think to the extent that businesses can internalize that and understand that and embrace that, that is going to give them a competitive edge.
Absolutely. And with what you're focusing on, I'm just in deep thought here with everything you're talking about, because I think that's where people get so caught up in is the ROI and not focusing on. I love the trade show because I used to, all the companies I work for, they'd always send me to trade shows and then they won't get into any other of the social networks. And I'm like, it's the same thing. I'm building relationships. And I love it because you talk about it on Twitter. You're like, it's P2P. It's person to person.
Yeah.
It's the same platform. It's just global now. It's expanded. So I think that's phenomenal. And I want to talk about kind of your story. Well, hopefully, I don't know if you can share any of this, but I'd love for you to share some of, maybe not the companies, but some scenarios of how you've been able to help them transition and what campaigns work best for or systemized processes for certain industries.
Well, I mean, I work with a pretty wide variety of companies. I work with tech companies and consumer products and healthcare and B2B, travel. I've even got a project I'm working on now with the U.S. Air Force.
Oh, really? That's great.
Really, and it's not secret, so I can talk about it a little bit.
I'm curious about that. My brother's in the Air Force. What are you guys working on?
What they're looking at is how they might apply social media platforms to improve their supply chain.
Oh.
You can imagine that they have an extraordinarily complex supply chain, a global supply chain with hundreds of thousands of suppliers, ranging from General Electric to a mom and pop tool and die shop in central Ohio. So how do you connect this? How do you improve communications and collaboration and highlight trouble spots and enable change orders and changes and speed up communications and responsiveness. So that's one of the interesting projects I'm working on right now. But the main approach I take is before I get into any strategy at all, I look at the culture of the company. And I think this is really important for all of your listeners to think about, if they're confused about moving into this space or they haven't been as successful as they would like to be. I heard a quote the other day that said something about, well, some company said, well, Facebook sucks. It's not working for my business. And this guy's response was, Facebook is just Facebook. Facebook doesn't suck. Facebook is an opportunity. Right. Maybe you suck. Maybe you're not using it right. Maybe your content sucks. Right. Maybe you don't understand what you're doing. But don't blame Facebook.
Exactly.
It's like breathing. It's like blaming the water that you're drinking or the air that
the
you're
golf clubs.
It just blaming the golf clubs. That's exactly right.
Yep.
So the number one hotspot really is the culture, is to look at, is this a company that can support this, that understands we're going to be a publisher now.
Right.
We're not going to be just, it's easy. It's so easy and elegant to hand money to an advertising agency and wait for something to happen. Mm-hmm. But now people want to know us. They want to engage. They want answers, and they want answers now. And they don't want PR spin. They want to hear from you. And this is scary. And once one CMO said to me, I just want this to go away. Oh. These people are talking back to us. It's like the deer have guns.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
And so we need to understand this, and we need to work on this. So before you go out there and just start just diving into this stuff, you really need to make sure your organization is ready. So let me give you an example of this. I was brought in to help this company in New Jersey, and they're a very successful consumer product company, and they were having terrible shipping problems. And so they were just getting pelted on their Facebook page. And some of the people were very, very angry. Mm. And they were actually using, some pretty strong profanity on these Facebook pages. So they said, well, we're bringing you in to help us make this go away. I said, well, this is what you need to do. You need to solve your shipping problems. You've got to, it's not a social media problem. It's not a Facebook problem.
Right.
It's in your supply chain. We've got to fix the supply chain problem before you're going to be successful on social media. I worked with another company who is run by lawyers, and I mean literally run. The CEO and the COO are both lawyers. So they're used to a very controlled, conservative environment, a very controlled and conservative message. And that has served them very, very well. But that does not serve them well in this new environment. And to their credit, they know that. To their credit, they understand, and they're trying to change, and they're bringing me in to help them change, to help them put the foundations in place to make this work. And so, we're working on just, education, and we're working on understanding. We're working on improving some of their internal legal approval processes and streamlining some of that stuff, because you can't wait 5 days for a lawyer to approve a response to a problem on a Facebook page.
Right.
So we've got to get those things ready. We just can't dive in. We've got to understand our own strengths and our limitations, and we need to make adjustments for this new world. So that's the number one thing I would recommend that the people look at.
I think that's so brilliant, though, because you have to take an assessment first and know, okay, this is where our weaknesses are at. That's what we need coaching on or consulting and figuring out what your overall strategy is. But it's also, I love what you're talking about, too, because it's an exciting time right now for, I don't like to call them small business, but business owners, because they can, with this ability to connect now and put themselves out there, they can really overpower themselves over some of the big businesses out there because of their ability to want to connect. So what are your thoughts for small business owners that are in very competitive spaces with the big companies? How can they use a strategy to help them stand out more?
I think small businesses generally have an advantage in this space. And the reason is because they're closer to the customer. They've got less layers. So they can understand and they can listen and understand more intently, more closely, and respond more quickly. I see in a lot of big companies there are 3 or 4 layers between the people who are engaging with customers and the people who hold the purse strings and are in charge of the strategy. And they don't necessarily understand social media, and they want their results on a pie chart, and it's just not that easy. Where small business owners, they're in the trenches, and they see this stuff working, and it may not be a sale right away. It may be a new employee. It may be a new supplier. It may be solving a problem. But the business benefits start to accrue. And just like in the real world, when we do personal networking, it takes time. It takes patience. And you've got to show up. If you don't show up, if you stop going to the meetings, it's not going to work. You just got to keep on plugging. It's not like advertising where you got an advertising budget and you do an ad campaign and then you create awareness. And when the money goes away, the awareness goes away. What you do is you just keep plugging day after day, day after day. And then, the spending may not necessarily be as much as traditional advertising, but the awareness continues to go up because you're building it on an individual basis over time. Right.
Fantastic. Now, for maybe people that are in the corporate roles right now that are listening in, what are your strategies for the big businesses for a strategy for them to really understand their clientele? Should it be the people that are on the phones, what level? I mean, what's kind of the strategy you can help with big companies like that?
Well, I think the advantage that big companies have is generally they have a pretty well articulated strategy. They have a pretty well articulated go-to-market initiative. Generally, they really understand their customers. They're doing research. They do polls. They've got a CRM system. They've got people in the field. So they've got a tremendous amount of feedback. Now, the small businesses may not have that. They may not have those resources. So you got to dig a little bit more. And maybe with small businesses, you've got to spend some more time up front figuring out really what is our strategy? What is our niche? How do we fit in? And you've got to do that before you figure out how social media fits in. So usually the advantage going into the big companies that I enjoy is that they pretty much have a good marketing strategy. They just need some adjustments to figure out how it fits in, how they need to organize, how they need to budget for this thing, how they're going to develop content, what is the content strategy going to be, how do they organize for that, how do they resource for that, what's the culture that surrounds that as far as the responding to people and the approval process. So those are more higher level things that I deal with compared to working with smaller companies.
Right. I'm curious, just one more question with the bigger businesses, because I've seen companies do different things where they actually have an internal social media team, or
Yeah.
they have heads in each department so they can kind of cut down on the silo factor and try to bring it together. What's your best, what do you think about that?
I think there should be a center of excellence. I think there needs to be a hub of people that I just don't think it's cost effective for a company for everybody in every division to be an expert.
Right.
I think you need to have a center of excellence to say, okay, here is the one person or the team who is going to keep steering the ship in the right direction. And they're going to supply the overarching strategy. They're going to help you with your problem solving, with your content, with your tactics and initiatives. They may even be supplying you the content that you can use. And this kind of hub and spoke type of model, I think, works the best as far as large organizations. I think that's the most cost effective. And then you might have another party involved, like a consultant or an advertising agency in many companies. You might bring in different software suppliers to help. But that's usually the best structure.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. So I want to just shift gears for a few minutes and just go right into the Twitter world for a little bit, because you really have opened my eyes up to this world and how it works. Because when I first found out about it, I was like you, I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Why do I need to be tweeting? and so I really, because I love your quote in your book where you talk about Twitter is like the trailer to the blogs movie. So now that these companies, big or small, whatever industry they're in, have a strategy and they've got content that they're putting out there that's engaging and it's creating relationships, how do they incorporate Twitter specifically to really grow their connections?
Well, there are really lots of different ways to apply Twitter, and there are really 5 kind of main ways to approach it from a corporate perspective. The one that is misused the most, I think, is creating a corporate account. Now, let me give you an example. Are you familiar with the Chick-fil-A chain of restaurants? Right, there are these chicken restaurants, and they have these funny advertisements featuring cows, encouraging people to eat more chicken. So I was working with a regional manager for this chain, and she said, "Well, we're going to open up Twitter accounts for all our restaurants." And I said, "Okay, well that's cool." And she said, "We're going to have a picture of the actual restaurant as the Twitter avatar." And so I explained to her that the real value of Twitter is to make personal connections. How do you create an emotional attachment to a building?
Right.
She said, "Oh, I get it. We should use the cows in the picture." I said, "No." I said, "What if you use the store manager?
Right.
Chick-fil-A Joe, or, Chick-fil-A Sandra, or whatever." And then it's a corporate account and you own that account. And if the store manager changes, the new store manager just takes over that same account, changes the name, changes the picture. You can do that infinitely. And then they actually build relationships with people in their zip code, in their service area.
Okay.
And they connect and they learn and they become friends with these people. And then they come into their store. And they recognize each other, and that's when I said that's when the magic happens. So most companies, they don't get that. They're still broadcasting and doing PR spin from a corporate account. And I mean, sometimes you have to do that, especially big companies. There's an expectation that there's going to be a corporate account and corporate news.
Right.
But a better idea, and the second idea, is to have people actually representing your brand. So like I've got a friend who's a vice president of a big cable network, and in his bio it says, my name is John. I'm the vice president of digital strategy for blah, blah, blah network. And so it says, this is who I am. I work for this company. So he's building connections and relationships, and people can see right on there, this is a real human being, and he's representing his company.
Mm-hmm.
That's ideal. And because what you do is you make all of your employees a beacon for your brand. Everybody becomes a marketing representative in a way. Now, a third strategy is kind of like a hybrid, where if you've got service people, so like AT&T, for example, might have AT&T Susan, and what she would do is she would handle, the East Coast. So when people can complain about their telephone service or something, or their wireless, then you've got a real name and a real face. It's still AT&T, but you've got a real live person that you can connect to in a human way.
Right.
So I think that's certainly legitimate. That's pretty cool. And then a last one that's kind of obscure, but I'm seeing this more and more, and I think it's really fun, is that some of these businesses are like creating personas for their businesses. Like there's a Mexican restaurant in I think it's Portland, and their tacos tweet.
Tweeting tacos.
So the tacos are tweeting.
Oh, that's great.
There was a big fashion brand in New York where they had this made-up person who was like a fashion shopper, and she would tweet about her shopping experiences. And it wasn't a real person.
Oh, really?
It was very entertaining.
Yeah,
Coca-Cola has created an account for the founder of the company who's been dead 100 years. And it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Because it's basically he's tweeting as if he were alive today, observing our popular culture today.
That is brilliant.
It's brilliant.
It is. It really is.
It's entertaining.
Yep.
It's conversational. It's creative, and that's exceptional content. So I love that. It breaks the rule of P2P and being human, but I think that does it in a fun way.
Oh, I love that. That's great. I haven't seen some of those yet, so I'll definitely keep my eyes out for that, because I just love the concept of being able to take it to the next level and have fun with it in their business. Because I think so many business owners get overwhelmed with all of this, and they feel like they have to systematize it where it takes the fun out of it, and there's not that enjoyment where they can really connect and have fun with it. So I love that. That's great. So what are some of the future trends that you see for the social media marketing world?
Well, I think there's lots of amazing things going on. And I think the two things that are kind of on my radar right now that I've been thinking about is we're living in an increasingly information dense world. Mm-hmm. So how do we get our content to stand out? Even if we do a really good job, the competition is getting greater and greater and greater and greater.
Right.
So how do we fight back? How do we keep that mind share that we have with our customers? If they're enjoying our tweets, they're enjoying our blogs, our videos, our podcasts, whatever, how do we just keep that up in a world where there's more and more competition? So that's the first thing that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, those types of strategies. Then the other thing that I think is just going to change everything is augmented reality. And we've seen the first shot across the bow on this with the buzz in the last few weeks around the Google Glass project, where now we have wearable computers. The internet is going to be with us everywhere, ubiquitous. It's going to surround us like the air that we breathe. We're going to have a digital layer on top of the real world.
Wow.
The implications for entertainment and education and marketing is profound. Mm-hmm. It's just profound. I've written that, to me, this isn't just going to be like the next Facebook, or even the next internet. This is like the next electricity. I think it's going to be that transformational of a change to our lives, and even like in just the ethics of it. I mean, the being able to record everything you do, everywhere you are, every moment of the day, with every person that you're with.
Right.
Just think of some of the relationship implications and the legal implications,
Exactly.
the ethical implications.
Right.
So not to mention the implications for businesses, and what does content even look like in that kind of
Right.
work?
Yeah. Wow, it's mind-blowing. It's almost like I can't even wrap my mind around it yet, because it's like we're jumping into a whole nother stratosphere with marketing and with marketing. It's amazing. So, well, that's interesting. So stay tuned for definitely insights on what's going on with that, and follow Mark on his blog, because he'll keep you updated with all of those intricacies for the future. But I'd love to just end this with the last question, and this is kind of where I want you to think about. It's the 5-minute makeover. So it's $1 million question. If you had to start over from scratch today, without knowing anyone in your contacts and without having any of the resources that you have today, what would you do to rebuild your empire?
Empire in air quotes. Using air quotes. Well, I'll tell you, Chris. I mean, I would more or less go the same route that I've gone, actually, because it's worked really well, and I kind of fumbled my way into it, but my business instincts were strong in this area, and that is, you have to build your reputation and create your voice of authority through content. And like we talked about, really that means, for all intents and purposes, rich content. I kind of stumbled into the blogging thing, but as I look back, that was exactly the right thing to do. I've also done some work, with videos. I'm going to be starting a podcast soon.
Fantastic.
So this idea of creating rich content to build your business, and Chris, I mean, my business has been around for over 5 years now. My advertising budget is zero. Out of pocket. I get 100% of my business through the blog, somewhat LinkedIn and Twitter, but mostly through the content that I provide. And so that's the path I stumbled into. And if I had to do it all over again, I would be more strategic about it, but that's the same thing I would do.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I love it. And that's so great. I mean, no advertising dollars. I mean, that's unheard of for most people to think about that. So it's brilliant. So where can everybody find out about you and all of your books as well, if you want to talk about your new one, Return on Influence?
Well, you can find just about everything you need to know about me on my website, which is businessesgrow.com, because I figured nobody could spell Schaefer and find me. So it's Businesses Grow, and I would invite your listeners to connect with me there on Twitter and subscribe to my blog. You can find information about my books. We talked quite a bit about the Twitter book, but I've also got this new book out, Born to Blog, and that's really an awesome way to learn about blogging. It's the same style as the Twitter book, where it's short, it's human, it's fun, it's accessible, and it really takes you through it. And then the book that's really become an international sensation, in fact, I'm going to Japan for a speaking tour on this book next week, is Return on Influence. And this is a significant book because it explores this entirely new marketing channel of social influence marketers, finding and nurturing people who create word of mouth buzz out there that can help create awareness for your company and your products.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, this has been an absolute blast, Mark. You've shared incredible information. Everything will be in the show notes for all the listeners to find out all details. And I'm going to put some more resources in there with all of Mark's contact details. So thank you so much for taking the time to come out and share all this information. This was incredible.
Truly my pleasure. Be happy to come back anytime.
Excellent. I will take you up on that offer for sure. Well, everybody go out and make it a great day. And I hope you enjoyed that episode. I'd love to get your feedback here for the Lifestylepreneur podcast right in iTunes. Simply leave us a 5-star and a review letting us know what you like, who you're interested in hearing more from, and what topics you really want help with in your business that I can bring on those key experts to really fine tune and help you in your business and creating the lifestyle of your dreams. And I'll be giving shout outs, so make sure you put your name and your website address if you want me to share that with the community as well. And again, thanks for listening. I'm so excited that you found the Lifestylepreneur podcast, and I can't wait to connect with you and learn more about your business as we continue to grow this community. So again, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Lifestylepreneur podcast. Again, I'm Kris Gilbertson, and I'm committed to bringing you top training from leading lifestylepreneurs all over the world to help you break through and turn your dreams into your ideal lifestyle. And make sure to join us at www.lifestyleacademy.com to receive VIP training from specific guests I interview on the show, so that you can really easily start to implement what you've learned from listening. I know we're all busy, and sometimes we don't have time to listen to the entire podcast or take notes, because I'm always listening on the go. So I like to call it the Lifestyle Cliff Notes to creating your ideal business and make it really simple for you. So those will be sent via the email list. Plus, I also want to connect with you personally, and being on the Lifestyle Academy mailing list is where all the magic happens. We'll host VIP trainings once a month that we can't always bring out on the podcast with even more detailed information. And I also want to connect with you personally. I want to know what's going on in your business and what you need help with, and who I can bring on to aid you in creating your ideal lifestyle. And so I'll be asking questions every once in a while that I want you to reply, and I reply back to you personally. So again, until next time, wishing you on your way to achieving all of your dreams. Talk to you soon.